The great question. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that everything you've been working for, the career milestones, the upgrades, the likes, the goals, the incessant productivity, all of it suddenly feels hollow. You get dressed, step outside into the machinery of modern life, and everything is running exactly as it should be. The trains are on time, the notifications are lighting up your phone, and your digital assistant reminds you that you're due for a meeting in 20 minutes. But beneath the surface, a quiet sense of dread presses against your ribcage. It's not fear exactly. It's emptiness, the cold, echoing kind that no success or purchase or affirmation can seem to silence. You've done everything right, haven't you? Followed the rules, set the goals, climbed the ladder. So why does it feel like something essential is missing? Why does life seem like a perfectly constructed cage, glittering with the illusion of choice and comfort, but built to keep something far deeper suppressed? Now ask yourself this. What if progress, the word we cling to with almost religious fervor, is not a promise, but a sedative? What if the very thing we are told gives life meaning, moving forward, growing, optimizing, innovating, is what's slowly draining life of its meaning altogether? There was a time when humans asked why they were alive. They gathered under stars, told stories, painted on cave walls, sang to gods they couldn't see, and feared the mysteries they couldn't explain. Today, mystery is algorithmically minimized. There is a tutorial for every spiritual ache, a productivity hack for every quiet moment of reflection. You are told that meaning will arrive with the next milestone, that purpose is a reward for efficiency, that identity is a brand you must constantly update. But what if this is all a distraction? What if our so-called progress is just an elaborate treadmill, moving faster and faster toward a horizon we never actually reach? Think about the last time you were truly still, not scrolling, not working, not consuming, just present. Can you even remember? Most people can't. Silence feels unbearable. Rest feels lazy. Even grief is something we are taught to manage efficiently. Somewhere along the line, our culture stopped asking what the soul needs and started asking what the market demands. We built cities that touch the sky, developed tools that let us speak across continents, mapped out galaxies, and digitized libraries of ancient wisdom. But we forgot how to look another person in the eyes without the urge to check our phones. We forgot how to sit with our own sadness without anesthetizing it with entertainment, noise, or numbing. The cathedrals we once built to house the sacred are now replaced by glass towers dedicated to commerce and control. We measure intelligence by output, worth by visibility, and love by transaction. And yet, despite all this, suicide rates climb, anxiety spreads like wildfire, and people report feeling lonelier now than at any other time in recorded history. We have more ways to communicate than ever, and yet connection itself feels like a dying language. Could it be that we've mistaken technological advancement for moral evolution, that we've confused convenience with enlightenment? Progress, it seems, has become a new god, but it is a cold god. It demands everything, your attention, your time, your soul, and it offers no genuine transcendence in return. It promises freedom through automation, but delivers alienation through disconnection. It whispers that happiness is just around the corner. One more app, one more achievement, one more purchase away. But it never actually delivers, because it can't. Because the one thing that's missing from this sleek, forward-moving world is the one thing it can never provide: meaning. So here we are, wired, stimulated, ambitious, and deeply spiritually starved. We run faster and faster toward a future that we are told will solve everything. But deep down, we feel the truth creeping in like a draft beneath a sealed door. Something is deeply wrong. And worse, we're not supposed to talk about it. We're supposed to keep playing along, keep smiling for the camera, keep optimizing our morning routine, keep updating our status. But what if we stopped? What if, for once, we allowed ourselves to really ask the forbidden question? What if the world we built is not evolving, but unraveling? If you've ever felt like your life was following a script that someone else wrote, if you've ever sensed that there's more to existence than what can be measured, marketed, or monetized, then you are not alone. You are glimpsing something most people spend their entire lives trying to suppress. You are brushing up against a truth that is uncomfortable, radical, and deeply human. And now that you've seen it, even just a glimpse, you can't unsee it. So the real question becomes, what are you going to do now? The hidden problem. Its psychological, philosophical roots. We've become fluent in a language that doesn't speak to the soul. Every new notification, every technological advancement, every step forward in convenience has taught us to worship efficiency, speed, and control. Yet for all our precision and progress, a subtle emptiness festers in the background, like a forgotten song humming beneath the static of modern life. And here lies the heart of the illusion. What we call progress is often little more than the ever-tightening coil of an existential treadmill, movement without meaning, momentum without depth. You see it in the man who achieves everything he was told would make him happy, the degree, the job, the home, the curated life, only to find himself scrolling endlessly through distractions late at night, haunted by a question he can't articulate. You see it in the woman whose days are filled with tasks and accomplishments, but who weeps in the quiet of her mind, unsure why the world feels so far away despite being so connected. The systems that promised fulfillment delivered function. The culture that promised liberation sold productivity. We have gained tools but lost rituals. We have engineered comfort but abandoned wonder. Carl Jung warned us long ago, the more you adapt to a mad world, the madder you become. In a society obsessed with rationalization and external validation, the soul, that deeply intuitive, irrational force, becomes a casualty. Jung's concept of the shadow, the unseen and unacknowledged parts of the self, becomes relevant here. Modern progress often requires the repression of inner truth. The deeper instincts, the need for silence, connection to nature, communion with the eternal, are sidelined in favor of measurable outcomes and monetizable skills. This is not an accident. It's a byproduct of a worldview that prizes the material over the metaphysical, the explicit over the symbolic. In other words, we have confused development with expansion, assuming that adding more to our external world automatically nurtures our internal one. Nietzsche saw this as a symptom of a dying culture, one that had killed its gods and now wandered the desert of nihilism, trying to fill the void with spectacle and stimulation. The Übermensch, in Nietzsche's terms, was not someone who achieved more, but someone who redefined value itself, who created meaning in a world that had lost its sacred center. The modern individual is psychologically fragmented because their desires are no longer born of the self, but of the marketplace. When your sense of identity is shaped by algorithms, advertisements, and cultural trends, your inner voice becomes distorted. The result? Chronic dissatisfaction. The pursuit of progress turns into an addiction to novelty. New gadgets, new goals, new versions of the self, none of which address the spiritual malnutrition that lies beneath. Arthur Schopenhauer, the grim philosopher of desire, noted that human life oscillates between suffering and boredom. In our age, we've simply added distraction as a buffer between the two. But distraction isn't neutral. It suppresses inquiry. It postpones the confrontation with deeper truths. We no longer sit with discomfort. We scroll past it. We no longer contemplate meaning. We consume meaning-themed content. Even our language betrays the problem. We speak of content instead of stories, users instead of human beings, growth as if it's always positive. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, once said that when a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. It's not hedonism in the classical sense. It's a compulsive form of numbing, a kind of spiritual anesthesia. Frankl believed that meaning wasn't something you invented, but something you discovered, often through suffering, reflection, and moral responsibility. Yet in a society where progress is measured in GDP, follower counts, and personal efficiency, suffering is pathologized, reflection is minimized, and moral responsibility is outsourced to institutions. This is the hidden virus in our definition of progress. It amputates the very experiences that lead to self-knowledge. This isn't just a philosophical issue, it's deeply psychological. The nervous system wasn't designed to process the level of stimuli we endure daily. The soul, if we can still use that word without embarrassment, wasn't built to chase metrics. The result is a disoriented mind, a restless heart. You might think you're pursuing success, but what if success is a maze built to keep you running in circles? You might think you're advancing, but what if you're just accelerating into alienation? Jean-Paul Sartre believed that humans are condemned to be free. That is, forced to make choices in a world with no inherent meaning. In that freedom lies terror, and modernity has responded by creating systems that make choices for us. Curated feeds, prescribed lifestyles, recommended beliefs. These systems promise safety, but they rob us of the existential confrontation that makes life truly ours. And perhaps this is the cruelest irony of all. In our attempt to master the world, we've lost ourselves. We traded initiation for information, wisdom for data, reverence for optimization. And yet, the hunger remains, gnawing at the edges of our well-ordered lives, whispering in the moments between meetings, lingering in the quiet before sleep. You may have felt it, that aching intuition that something essential has been misplaced. That life, for all its speed and sparkle, is missing a center. That your efforts, however noble, might be building a ladder on the wrong wall. But what if this isn't failure? What if this unrest is a signal, a rupture in the illusion? What if this growing dissatisfaction isn't a problem to solve, but a doorway, a threshold, a summons to look beyond the visible metrics and touch something ancient, raw, and sacred? This is where we begin to see the shape of the deeper consequences. But before we attempt to break free, we must first confront what that illusion is doing to us, how it shapes our lives invisibly, intimately, and irreversibly. The unseen consequences. We often measure the cost of progress in dollars, hours, or raw statistics. But what if the real toll is something we can't quantify, something deeper, more intimate, more corrosive to the human spirit? This is where the true danger lies, not in what we gain through so-called advancement, but in what silently disappears while our eyes are fixed on the next upgrade. The consequences aren't announced with sirens or headlines. They unfold quietly, like the erosi, on of stone by a gentle stream. Our attention spans fray, not from a lack of intelligence, but from an environment designed to fragment thought. Our relationships weaken, not out of malice, but because we've outsourced connection to pixels and performance. Our inner lives dim, not from a lack of meaning, but because we no longer practice the discipline of stillness. And so we become haunted by a strange fatigue, an exhaustion not of the body, but of the soul, a tiredness that no amount of sleep or productivity hacks can fix. This is the tyranny of hyperstimulation. When every spare moment is filled with noise, notifications, media, commentary, we lose the ability to dwell in silence. And silence is where the soul speaks. It's in that empty space, that void of distraction, where the real questions begin to emerge. Who am I beneath all my roles? What matters when no one's watching? What am I avoiding by staying so busy? But we've been trained to fear that silence, to avoid those questions, because they might lead to discomfort. Yet without discomfort, there is no transformation. In this way, the modern world doesn't merely distract, it domesticates. It trims the wild edges of human experience and turns us into consumers of meaning rather than creators of it. This domestication is subtle. You don't feel the cage if the walls are made of convenience. You don't resist the leash if it offers rewards. But somewhere within, a deeper self notices and grieves. Relationships suffer next, not because we no longer care, but because we no longer know how to be present. We talk, but don't listen. We scroll past each other's realities. We substitute performance for vulnerability. As Aldous Huxley feared, we have not been enslaved by tyranny, but by pleasure, by comfort so persistent and pervasive that it lulls us into forgetting how to fight for intimacy, how to sit with pain, how to love without agenda. Friendship becomes networking. Romance becomes transaction. Community becomes algorithm. The soul, starved of real communion, retreats. And lonelies. Ness, the epidemic no one knows how to treat, becomes the silent scream echoing through every crowded street and silent home. But perhaps the deepest consequence is existential, something closer to what Viktor Frankl called the existential vacuum. When life becomes about keeping up rather than waking up, we lose our sense of telos, our purpose, our orientation, our reason for being. And this vacuum doesn't remain empty. It fills with anxiety, depression, addiction, and despair. These conditions, often labeled as purely biochemical, may also be cries of the soul, a scream against the absurdity of living without meaning. You can treat symptoms, you can numb feelings, but you can't ignore the hunger for long without it becoming a sickness. That's why even the most successful, most admired, most seemingly fulfilled individuals can collapse into crisis, because the metrics they followed led them to a summit that overlooked a hollow valley. The illusion of progress is cruelest to those who achieve it. And still, the machine spins. More self-help books, more strategies, more optimization, all promising to help you do more, be more, feel more, while rarely asking if more is what you need. The hidden cost of all this is our humanity, not in the abstract, but in the everyday moments we no longer live fully. The quiet meal shared without distraction, the slow walk under a darkening sky, the awkward but real conversation that doesn't fit into a soundbite. These are the places where meaning lives, not in the achievement, but in the aliveness. And meaning cannot be downloaded, purchased, or engineered. It must be lived. It must be chosen. Here's the twist. Many of us know this. Intuitively, in our gut, we feel the wrongness. We sense that something is off, but we doubt ourselves. We think, maybe I'm just ungrateful. Maybe I'm broken. Maybe I need to try harder, think more positively, be more productive. But what if the system itself is broken? What if your unease is not a flaw, but a compass? What if your sadness is not dysfunction, but wisdom? To realize this is to begin seeing with different eyes. The philosopher Soren Kierkegaard wrote that the greatest hazard of all, losing oneself, can occur very quietly in the world, as if it were nothing at all. That's how the illusion works. It doesn't destroy you in one grand moment. It wears you down through 10,000 tiny compromises. It seduces you into becoming a stranger to your own life. And this isn't just about individuals. Entire cultures suffer this loss. When societies glorify speed over depth, distraction over contemplation, consumption over creation, they forget the very things that make life worth living. Art becomes content, religion becomes branding, wisdom becomes life hacks, everything sacred is flattened into utility. But we are not machines. We are not problems to be solved or brands to be managed. We are human beings, strange, messy, luminous creatures with longings that defy logic and hearts that ache for something beyond the visible. So the question is not whether modern progress has brought benefits. It clearly has. The question is, what has it asked us to sacrifice? And more importantly, was the trade worth it? For many, the answer is becoming clear. The gains in convenience, power, and efficiency have not translated into greater joy, peace, or meaning. We have upgraded our tools but downgraded our souls. And until we name this, until we reckon with the invisible cost of our ambition, we will continue chasing phantoms and wondering why the world feels increasingly unreal. But naming the loss is only the beginning. There is another way, a different path not based on rejection of modernity, but on reorientation. A way of reclaiming what has been forgotten, of recovering the depth beneath the surface, of remembering how to be truly alive. It requires courage, it requires slowness, it requires you. And in the next section, we'll begin to explore how we might wake up from the dream we were sold and step into the life we were meant to live. The rebellion, how to break free. But what if none of this had to be your destiny? What if the creeping numbness and gnawing dissatisfaction weren't a final sentence, but a deceptive illusion? A matrix woven from advertising jingles, metrics of success you never consented to, and a deeply impoverished vocabulary for inner life. Imagine for a moment that every voice which told you to keep going, to hustle, to optimize, to accumulate, was not guiding you toward the truth, but subtly keeping you away from it. The Great Rebellion, then, does not begin with protests or revolutions, but in silence, in the single, radical act of refusing to play a game you never agreed to. This is not the rebellion of political flags or economic countersystems. It is the quiet, psychological rebellion that begins the moment you dare to ask, what if none of this leads to meaning? Begin here. Take an honest inventory of your life. Not just the things you own or the roles you play, but the moments you actually felt alive, those fleeting instances when time fell away, when awe took hold of your lungs like a forgotten wind, when you cried not out of sadness but because something inside you was finally seen. Now ask yourself, did those moments arise from checking off boxes on a career path, from your latest Amazon package, from getting 1,000 likes? Or did they come in moments of stillness, connection, beauty, things utterly unquantifiable, deeply spiritual, and therefore invisible in modern metrics of progress? This is the beginning of the great escape. When you start trusting the pulse of your own aliveness more than the algorithms trying to predict your desires. Historically, this has always been the way out for those brave enough to see. The ancient Stoics proposed that freedom does not come from changing the world, but from changing your relationship to it. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, wrote in his journals that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts, and he cautioned himself against being pulled by the chaos of others' ambitions. In more modern times, Viktor Frankl, survivor of the Nazi death camps, discovered that meaning can be found even in suffering if you retain the power to choose your response. And yet, perhaps the most powerful examples of all come not from famous philosophers, but from ordinary individuals who stopped mid-stride, looked around, and asked, "Why am I running?" Take the story of a once successful Wall Street analyst who, after years of depression masked by financial success, abandoned his career to become a carpenter. Or the woman who left her prestigious law firm to run a small farm where she grows food for recovering addicts. These aren't tales of escape, but of rehumanization. They are stories of people who broke through the illusion, not by winning the game, but by realizing it wasn't worth playing. The radical part of their story is not just quitting. It's that they redefined what progress even means. They stopped measuring success by external standards and instead used a compass few people dare consult, the deep, quiet voice within. But don't romanticize it. This rebellion isn't easy. The moment you question the narrative, the system will turn on you. You'll be told you're lazy, irrational, ungrateful. You'll feel fear, the existential kind, the sort that whispers you'll be nothing without your credentials, your productivity, your achievements. This is the resistance built into the machine. The fear isn't real, but it is powerful. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But he also warned that becoming oneself often means standing alone against the world and against the parts of yourself that have grown addicted to fitting in. So, how do you begin? Start by practicing presence. It's not sexy, but it's revolutionary. Meditation is not a retreat from the world, but a confrontation with its noise, its temptations, and its lies. Next, cultivate what philosopher Byung-Chul Han calls deep time, the kind of time where nothing is being extracted or optimized, but where contemplation and beauty are allowed to breathe. Read slowly, take walks with no destination, resist the urge to turn everything into content. Seek stillness not as a productivity hack, but as a sacred practice. Then embrace mystery again. We have been taught to fear what we do not know, to control every variable, to dissect meaning into data. But the soul does not thrive in certainty. It thrives in awe. Find rituals that bring you closer to the ineffable, music that stirs something ancient in you, poetry that leaves you trembling, conversations that feel like shared dreams. These are not luxuries, they are lifelines. The rebellion is about resacralizing what has been desecrated. Your emotions are not weaknesses, they are clues. Your longings are not distractions, they are maps. Your restlessness is not pathology, it is a compass pointing toward what your soul refuses to forget. And lastly, find others. The illusion of progress thrives in isolation, but dies in real community. Not the shallow networks built around self-promotion, but the raw, vulnerable kind forged through shared struggle and spiritual hunger. Seek people who don't just want to feel better, but want to wake up. Share your doubts, your contradictions, your discontent. In a world addicted to answers, your questions may be the most honest offering you can give. The rebellion is not loud, it may not even be visible, but it is absolute. It begins when you stop asking, "How do I get ahead?" and begin asking, "What is truly worth moving toward?" It begins when you trade achievement for alignment, optimization for a synchronous, authenticity, growth for grace. And it builds quietly in the silence between your breaths, in the tremble of an unspoken truth, in the moment you decide, "I will no longer trade my soul for a hollow version of progress." The ultimate truth, the final, most powerful realization. So here we are, after the illusions have cracked, after the ache has been named, after the rebellion has begun in silence and stillness. What remains? What is the final truth? The deep realization waiting not at the end of some grand journey, but quietly in the space that opens once the noise dies down? It's this: you were never broken. You were never behind. You were never late, lost, or failing. The very systems that told you to keep optimizing yourself were built on the lie that you were not enough to begin with. And perhaps the most painful part is realizing that you believed them. Not because you were weak, but because you were human. Because belonging matters. Because survival once depended on fitting in. But now you are free to choose differently. The ultimate truth is painfully simple, yet most people spend their entire lives avoiding it. You already are what you are seeking. What you long for, wholeness, love, meaning, peace, is not out there, not in a future version of yourself, not at the top of any ladder. It is already inside you, quietly waiting beneath layers of conditioning, consumerism, and fear. You've been taught to chase happiness like a horizon, like a destination you'll reach once you finally fix yourself. But happiness is not the reward for doing everything right. It is the natural state that arises when you stop doing violence to yourself in the name of improvement. This is not about giving up. It is about giving in. To life, to being, to the terrifying beauty of existing without a script. We've all been indoctrinated into the myth of becoming. Become more successful, more productive, more enlightened. But true transformation is not additive. It is subtractive. It is the slow, sometimes painful shedding of all that is. Not you. Every false identity, every belief that told you you had to earn love, every performance you gave to be acceptable. The real work is unlearning, unmasking, unbecoming. And when you do, when you stop trying to become someone, you discover the shocking truth. There is nothing wrong with simply being. You are not a problem to be solved. You are a mystery to be lived. And like any true mystery, you will never be fully understood, not by others, not even by yourself. But that doesn't mean you are lost. It means you are sacred. In a world obsessed with definitions, categories, and clarity, your depth, your contradictions, your unresolved questions, these are not failures. They are poetry. You are not supposed to be a spreadsheet. You are a sonnet, a symphony, a storm. You don't need to be figured out. You need to be felt. And so the final invitation is not to fix your life, but to live it, fully, honestly, courageously, to feel joy without guilt, to grieve without shame, to love without armor, to rest without needing to justify it, to fail without internalizing it, to stop outsourcing your sense of worth to numbers, titles, or applause. This is the revolution, to show up as you are, not as a brand, not as a product, but as a person, a flawed, feeling, luminous human being. The culture won't applaud you for this. It won't reward you. In fact, it may ridicule you, misunderstand you, call you naive. That's okay. You're not doing this for them. You're doing it because your soul is tired of being packaged, priced, and pushed. You're doing it because there's a small, fierce voice inside you, maybe barely audible, maybe screaming, that knows this isn't what you were made for. You were not made to chase meaning. You were made to create it moment by moment, breath by breath, through presence, love, and honest living. And when you finally stop running from your self, from your past, from your imagined future, you might notice something strange. The silence you feared is not empty. It's full of guidance, full of clarity, full of the kind of wisdom you can't Google and can't monetize. In that silence, you may remember what it's like to feel the sun on your skin without thinking of your to-do list. to hold a friend's gaze without wondering how you appear, to hear your own laughter and realize it hasn't been edited for Instagram. This is what it means to return, not to regress, not to escape, but to come home, to yourself. You may also begin to see others differently. When you stop viewing yourself as a project to be optimized, you stop seeing others that way too. You begin to notice the humanity in the stranger, the pain behind the anger, the longing behind the success. You start to soften, to listen, to forgive, to connect not through shared achievements, but through shared humanness. And that changes everything. That makes even a life without accolades feel sacred. That makes ordinary days shimmer with meaning. That turns your existence from a performance into a prayer. So if you're still watching, still listening, still here, maybe it means you're ready. Not ready to fix yourself, not ready to become someone new, but ready to return to what you've always known, deep down in the quiet places no algorithm can touch. That you are enough, that this moment is enough, that being alive, truly alive, is not a problem to be solved but a miracle to be honored. You do not need more productivity hacks. You do not need another 5-step plan. You need presence. You need silence. You need to stop abandoning yourself every time the world demands more than your soul can give. The great realization is not that the system is broken, it's that you don't have to live inside it. That freedom is not something granted, but reclaimed. That wholeness is not found, it is remembered. This is not the end. It's the beginning of a life no longer driven by fear, performance, or shame. The beginning of a different kind of success. One measured not in followers or funds, but in how fully you feel your days. The beginning of a quiet revolution, one heart at a time, starting with yours.